Pop Culture Pastor.
All right, Cody. Have you ever known someone who...
Yes, I have.
That's the show for today. Cody knows people.
I do. Multiple.
Have you ever known someone who is not an ideal person, but you just accept them anyways? Like you're just under the impression, well, this is who they are, and they're just never going to be any different.
Oh, I've known quite a few in my life that either there's quirks about them or that when you have time with them, cherish those moments because they're going to let you down. I've had quite a few of those. You have to think about what you can control in those situations, and they are who they are, and they have shown you who they are.
Yeah, I asked that because clearly Jimmy's dad, Randy, Jeff Daniels, he's going to be a key component of this episode.
Oh, I want to drop the people's elbow on him.
And oh man, it's just one of those things where there's going to be moments we talk about in this episode where, yes, you're upset with him, but then also there's these weird moments where you're like, oh man, I don't think he's trying to hurt Jimmy, but he's just absolutely injuring him. And it's hard to watch.
So I think his character knows who he is.
Yeah.
And
pretty comfortable with himself.
Is very comfortable with that and doesn't get why other people don't realize who he is.
Yeah. This is Pop Culture Pastor Watch-Alongs, and we are here to recap and talk about Shrinking, Season 3, Episode 10, The Bodyguard of Sadness. And yeah, we'll just start off with the episode. You know where we're going here. We got the pre-credit check-ins, as always, where we're moving through some scenes quickly just to see where everyone's at the beginning of this episode. We start with Jimmy's dad, Randy, Jeff Daniels. I feel like we got to run through all his names.
Jeffrey.
And Jimmy and Liz and Alice and baby Sutton. We learn that Charlie has to relocate to Memphis for 3 months for a work assignment. And Brian is there, and he is already spiraling about it because he does not want to go to Memphis.
Don't blame him.
But they have barbecue.
They do, but is it good barbecue?
And also, it's apparently we stole it from African Americans, which Gabby points out to Derek, and Derek is very bummed.
Like, there's also people that walk in Memphis, and that's a thing.
That song shows up in this episode wonderfully, by the way. But Brian is not having it. And in the conversation that happens, Randy shares one of his trademark stories that involves the belittling of Jimmy.
That happens a lot.
As Randy seems to do. And it makes Jimmy visibly uncomfortable. And we cut to Jimmy and Liz after this little opening scene where we get some exposition about what's going to happen with Brian, and we get Randy, being mean and cruel without maybe trying to with Jimmy. But Jimmy confides to Liz that Randy isn't going to be at Alice's graduation. And here's where we get this really unexpected bonding moment. Liz reveals that her own father was what she calls shallow but charming, not overtly cruel, but the kind of guy who made you feel small without trying. And then Jimmy hugs her. And it's like this sweet little moment because Liz asks if maybe he should save some of that emotional energy for Sophie. And Jimmy admits, we didn't make it.
Poor James.
And there's this quietness about this scene that's lovely because Liz and Jimmy are connecting over their shared daddy issues. Is a layer we haven't got with those two before. And you know what I really loved about it, Cody, was even though Liz was kind of pretending to protest, like, you're crushing me. She's pretending to be annoyed. There's this moment where he's got his arms around her because he's hugging her from her back. And she, after he says what's happened with Sophie, she puts her hands on Jimmy's arms. And I just thought that was like the sweetest thing ever. It's just a little gesture, but it reveals true caring.
They have a relationship. It might be up and down at times, but this shows that there is levels of compassion, caring there.
Yeah, and I think what you're supposed to see this episode kind of in the background is that both Alice and Jimmy have more than maybe Jimmy thinks at times. They have a support system. They have a family. Maybe Jimmy doesn't have his biological dad how he wants them, but he's got more than enough. Jorge and Sean are back at their MMA therapy group with Gabby, and they're still not getting along. They show up to Gabby's PTSD group, and Jorge is freezing Sean out hard, man. Gabby tries to get them to talk it out like adults. Take it easy. This isn't the Jerry Springer show. What's that?
It's a good question.
I love how Gabby falls out when he asks what's that. It's like, oh, I forgot I was that old. But then she tries to explain. It was like, well, it was something we watched when we stayed home sick from school. It was toxic and violent, and I miss it so much. Yes.
Jerry.
Jorge has a different idea, though, Cody. He wants to settle it in the ring.
Jorge, you were getting beat up left and right by all the people anytime we have fighting scenes.
This show literally starts with Sean almost killing a dude with his bare hands. I don't think this is a good idea. And Sean doesn't think so either. He's literally in the ring with him. He's like, come on, man. Let's not do this. But then he takes a swing at him and gets a good shot in on Sean. And then Sean promptly knocks his front tooth out. It's kind of horrifying and hilarious at the same time. And it gives Jorge this comedy lisp for the rest of the episode because he doesn't want to get his tooth fixed out of spite.
I would have been at the dentist immediately.
The fight doesn't resolve anything, of course, but it maybe releases a little bit of the pressure so that they can actually be around each other, even if Jorge's still not super pleased. But in the past, Sean might have spiraled after a moment like this. Instead, he just sort of shrugs and keeps moving forward. He's okay with someone being angry at him.
It's okay that people have those emotions, and it's okay for you to let them have those emotions.
Yeah, we go to Liz and Derek's house where the whole family is under the one roof, and Derek is having all the feels because apparently since Derek's surgery, he is just loving life and very grateful.
Strong emotions tend to happen, especially after these major heart procedures. Mm-hmm. Known several people within my family that have had similar procedures, and they would tear up way easier than they ever would have prior to. And this one, it hit close to home, and I felt it.
Yeah. My grandpa had a stroke and was also, before the stroke, hardcore military man. Never saw feelings. And then after it was, all the feelings.
The feels.
So, yeah, I'm familiar with it, too. Alice and Summer are there as well. And, of course, Derek is just going on, "Hun, we are rich. I am filled with gratitude." I love how, literal he is this episode about telling everyone his feelings.
Well, you should do that.
Yeah, it's super healthy. I loved it. The conversation in the house, though, bounces from Matthew's shoe hustle success to the girls' graduation, and everyone starts ganging up on the youngest one, Connor, and basically saying, "Oh, you're the new Matthew."
Burn.
And he gets mad and drops that Will's girlfriend is pregnant, the oldest son.
Oh, snap.
And then there's a record scratch moment, and we go on to the next scene. But that's a big ongoing storyline in the episode. Jimmy and Gabby in Gabby's office. Gabby is telling Jimmy that Paul has left the building to her because she realizes that Jimmy doesn't know, but that Paul has left her the building for her trauma center. And Jimmy responds with an actually sincere, "That's awesome." So she was afraid that Jimmy would react poorly to this, but he references that he and Paul talked about this years ago, that he doesn't really want to run a business and that all Jimmy really cares about is seeing his clients, and he can do that anywhere. And in this moment, he's truly gracious, and it means a lot to Gabby.
So there is just the briefest of little pauses that he is a little taken aback, but he knows that this is Gabby's dream. He also knows that, I don't want to run a business. I don't have that capacity in me to run a business and see clients, and like it's probably real easy for him to show that emotion at that moment.
Yeah. Alice introduces Paul to Randy, Harrison Ford and Jeff Daniels together, as Happy Grandpa and Grumpy Grandpa. Paul's like, which one am I? You know which one.
I question it at times through this episode.
Yeah, right. Then there's this nice little moment. I mean, it starts off nice, but then it gets weird because Randy thanks Paul for being there after Tia's death and says, I wish I could have been around more. A line that is completely hollow. We know it.
Jeff, you knock it off.
Paul probably knows it. But Paul, because he's good at his job, does a great job of empathizing with Randy here, though. He's like, I suppose it was a tough time for you as well. I know it's difficult to know how to deal with people that are grieving. So he tries to give him some grace.
And I think that these two gentlemen might express the same amount of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And they both know Jimmy feels all the emotions.
Yeah. What's interesting in this moment is we get the first of 2 times in this episode where one of these two men, it looks like they want to say more, and then they stop themselves. Randy's is much shorter because after Paul says that, when he's empathizing with him, you get this moment where Randy almost says something and then he stops himself and says, oh, it is what it is. And it's like he snaps back.
Because he is not emotionally mature.
Yeah. And all I could think of was Paul had 10 seconds with this guy and nearly coaxed an honest response of feelings from him.
Well, he is Paul, so.
But the next time it happens, it's going to be Paul. It's going to be much sadder, but we'll get to that.
All the emotions.
Then Randy and Paul, then the conversation goes a little sideways because Randy essentially dismisses the entire concept of emotional connection and calls it something he didn't realize you could make money from, and describes Jimmy's mom as an emotional yapper type, which is where Jimmy gets it. Paul, who's barely hiding his contempt at this point, says, your son is an excellent therapist. Randy just kind of shrugs it off. And this scene's essential because it puts Paul and Randy side by side for us. And it shows us these two versions of guys that may have been similar at one point in their lives. Both of them very flawed, but one of them has grown. And you just see it.
Yeah.
Out in front of you. So it's a wonderful scene. And this leads right into the opening credits.
And maybe the song of the episode.
Probably not the song of the episode. But as Cody has told you, it's a wonderful song.
It's delightful.
So we start off with Jimmy and Paul after the credits. Jimmy wants to discuss his dad. And he leads with, I can't remember one single time when I have emotionally connected with my dad. And Paul, this was weird to me because Paul kind of one-ups him. He says, one time my dad woke me up in the middle of the night and locked me in the basement and told me he was going to set the house on fire. Which Jimmy responds like, okay, you win. And it's kind of a funny moment. But Cody, is this a good therapy technique?
It's a bit dismissive.
Yeah.
If someone is struggling with feeling validated with being heard, you one-upping them goes with their brain thinking, yeah, no one listens to me. No one truly sees me. No one acknowledges my plight or my feelings.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I thought, but I wanted to ask you first. And Paul, for what it's worth, this is just a little moment. This show is so good at putting in these little moments that are going to build to something later. But in this scene, Paul does encourage Jimmy to actually say what he needs to say to his dad. Not to change Randy, but because people rarely change, but to unburden himself.
I did have a little conflict with this.
Is this Paul speaking as a friend rather than...
So it's difficult giving therapeutic-esque advice to someone that's like a colleague or someone you have a personal relationship with because you're more emotionally invested.
It seemed logical to me because Paul tells him you can't be mad at someone for not changing their behavior if you haven't had the courage to tell them how it makes you feel, which seems right.
In a therapist session, you might be asking questions and get them to that place. where they identify, well, I really haven't told my dad how I feel, and I really haven't said these things. So, I mean, I guess I've been letting them off.
Yeah. But there is a heavy amount of foreshadowing. That's different.
That is.
Foreshadowing, because Paul says, if you don't get rid of this toxic stuff has a way of slipping out later.
He ain't wrong.
No. And it's not going to be a whole lot later, as it turns out. Liz and Derek sit down with Will and his girlfriend to talk these things out, this young couple who is now pregnant. And that they say they're planning on keeping the baby. But we find out that neither one of them really has a great job in the current moment. Derek's afraid AI is going to take both of them's jobs.
Thank you, Derek.
But the girlfriend may be falling back on mom talk, which is apparently a thing.
It is.
Liz and Derek are gently trying to explain how hard raising a child actually is, including, the actual act of giving birth, which does set up this hilarious moment where the girlfriend says she's going to do a water birth and Liz has to count to calm down. Liz is exactly the kind of person who I would imagine would freak out about something like that. The funny thing is they're very stern with them, but in the conversation in a loving way and say, hey, we love you. We support you. We'll help you any way we can. And they're trying to be these like serious parents. And then as soon as they shut the door, they're both like celebrating because they're excited. So this is going to set up some tension between them that needs to be resolved because Liz is going directly into ultra grandma mode. Whereas Derek, who's fresh off his health scare, he wants to travel. He wants to eat fruit that smells like butt.
Don't do it. If it smells that way, it's going to taste that way, buddy.
So it's going to set up this tension for later in the episode. We go to Charlie and Brian, and Charlie tells Brian that he's secured family housing in Tennessee and that Brian could come along with Sutton. And Brian just like kind of rejects it immediately. It's too far. It's too humid. Too much sticky pecan pie.
Work.
Yeah, I've work. I can't go. I got a job, But later, right after the scene, he confesses to Gabby and Derek that he could absolutely work remotely and does most of the time.
I was going to say, I don't know him to ever be in an office.
Yeah, he just doesn't want to go. And this is Brian being classically, comfortably selfish, this is super interesting because this is the guy who delivered the TED Talk on healthy selfishness last episode and is now going to be tested on whether he can be unselfish when it counts.
Good luck, buddy.
Sean shows up in the middle of all this, by the way, and Derek offers Sean the apartment that Matthew was renovating. And the one, I guess it's an investment property.
Yes, they keep, because this was the place that they showed Sean in season 1.
Yes, and Sean can live there rent-free while finishing the repairs Matthew didn't complete, and this time Sean accepts.
There's a bidet feature with their sink now because he installed it upside down.
Jimmy takes Paul's advice and goes to the batting cages with his pops. And Jimmy can't hate anything until Randy tells him to picture someone's face on the ball that's really grinding his gears. Why is everything Jeff Daniels say in this show make you want to punch him in the stomach? Even the grinding of the gears, I'm like, oh man, who says that?
Car guys.
And of course, after he tells him this, he crushes one. And Randy brings up the Little League home run again. Classic core memory stuff. And Jimmy tries to use that to steer the conversation towards the core memory of Alice graduating. And that being that kind of moment for Alice. And Randy doesn't want to hear it. And for what it's worth, Jimmy echoes Paul's handling with Randy. He compliments him first. He's trying to be kind. He says, I think it's great how warm and generous you are when you come around. But he finally lays it out and he says, but that fun and done routine, that showing up, being charming, and then leaving, it makes the people who love him feel like they're not as important to him as he is to them. It's not enough for Alice, and it was never enough for him. And Randy deflects it kind of in a stern way. Like he says, I wasn't a touchy-feely parent. You got that from your mom. Your mom was the one who was good at this. And then Jimmy says something interesting that I think is going to get proven wrong by the end of the episode. He says, me and you is all Alice has. Is Jimmy projecting here his pain onto Alice? Is this Jimmy being dishonest with himself?
Yes and no. As far as family-wise, evidently that literally is all the family she does have.
That's true.
Like biological family. I don't know what happened to Jimmy's mom. I don't know what happened to Tia's parents. Like, I don't know. But what I do know is Alice has said it in one episode, and Jimmy has said it, that Grandpa and Jimmy are all she has as far as biological family.
Okay.
So that line, yes, on the surface is true, but he definitely is projecting his strong feelings about his dad from Alice's perspective.
I'm going to mark that down as you agreeing with me. I'm
Yes and no.
Randy stays strong, though. He's not going to cancel his fishing trip. And he's starting to let on that he's getting annoyed.
He got a little feisty.
Yeah. He says, I'm just getting tired of this conversation. So if you have anything else to say, you better just get it out now. And he literally gives him an invitation to vent this toxicity building up inside him. And Jimmy declines.
Oh, I was so upset with James at this moment.
Oh, man. Yeah, because this is all leading to something.
In the short term, it's leading to soft serve.
Yeah. I mean, again, another sign that Randy, I don't think in his heart of hearts thinks he's being a bad guy. Like, he's clearly knows his limitations. He admits he's not that type of person.
Not at all.
And he's like, look, he's going to buy him some soft serve.
This is such a Jeff Daniels move from Terms of Endearment.
Flap! But this scene is a masterclass, by the way, because they're talking through a literal fence during most of this scene, which that symbolism isn't subtle, but it's really, really good. These two men are never going to see eye to eye. Cody, in your experience, is there a point where you just have to accept that a parent is never going to be the person you need them to be? And how do you help someone grieve a relationship with a person who's still alive?
That's a good question. And it looks different from case to case. But reminding people, you have plenty of evidence who this person is. You also have what you can control and what you cannot control. You're not going to be able to control your parent. They might say they're going to show up and then have a fishing trip.
Yeah.
You have to identify if you can handle the invite and the potential last minute ditch or not. Also, maybe have that firm conversation with a parent like, hey, I like it when you come around, but you need to come around when it's not just a car show.
Yeah. We go to this scene with Liz and Derek and Brian and Gabby, and basically Brian is telling them how he's not going to Tennessee and I should be allowed to not want to go to Tennessee. And Liz kind of calls him out a little bit, but then inspired by Gabby, Derek calls out Liz.
Yeah.
He says, I'm excited to be a grandpa, but a normal one. We'll see them on weekends and holidays and feed them way too much sugar and tell their parents ADHD isn't real.
Yeah.
And he says, I want to go to different time zones and eat fruit that smells like butt with you.
Can I just have an orange or an apple?
Liz says, that's not my jam, babe. And Derek leaves in a huff. And Brian and Liz, we see, kind of have the same issue this episode. Like, what are you willing to give for this person that you love? And we go to a scene with Jimmy, Alice, and Randy. Jimmy and Alice are having breakfast, overnight oats, which I'm still a little unclear of what those are, but they eat some weird stuff, apparently. Between this and the vomlet, it's clearly not good. And she must have eaten a lot of it in that time when Jimmy was kind of MIA to her.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Because she says it was a dark time. But Randy comes down with his bag packed. It's leaving time for him. And he tells Alice, say something came up. I'm going deep sea fishing. And Alice takes it fine, at least on the surface. And then they exchange pleasantries and she walks up to her room. And Randy delivers the gut punch to Jimmy on his way out. I told you she'd be fine. not everyone is as sensitive as you.
There are so many things Jeff Daniels says in just the short amount of time he's on screen. And I'm like, why do you say these things? Shut your yapper, Dad.
Do you know what's really interesting, though? Because, again, I'm going to fall back on this thing that I think he thinks you're supposed to see that his character thinks he is being caring. Because I love the way Jeff Daniels actually delivers this. He puts his arm on Jimmy's shoulder when he says it and kind of pats it afterwards. And you can tell he's clearly not trying to be cruel. And for him, this might even actually be Max caring, but Jimmy is not taking it that way.
It feels so condescending watching, and I imagine for Jimmy.
And that word, sensitive, is going to haunt Jimmy, as we see later in the episode. We get Jimmy and Alice in the Bronco before graduation. They're sitting in the parking lot. One of the best scenes of the season. And Jimmy or Alice are sitting there, and he starts to say something about Tia, and Alice just cuts him off, says, I know. And then your mom, she would have loved, I know. And they both get emotional, and it's a wonderful scene. And she tells him that everyone's going to be watching them because of her mom. And so she wants this moment right now, just the two of them in the car, to be their emotional moment. But when we get out there, we're going to just point at each other and be cool. And then she looks in the back of the seat looking for something and finds the giant fat head of her 2-year-old self. Cardboard cutout of her. And she says, I will never forgive you if you hold it up during the ceremony. And he promises, but does not keep that promise. They point at each other when her name gets called. And of course, he holds it up. It's a ultimate perfect Jimmy move. But Jason Segel and Lupita Maxwell are fantastic in this scene. There's no real jokes except for the fat head. There's no deflection. It's just this shared grief and shared love in this moment. And what is a big moment for both of them in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
Sean invites Jorge to come live with him in this kind of sweet moment. He's taken Jorge to show him this place that Derek is going to let him live.
Why are you rubbing it in my face?
Yeah. Of course, Jorge is still being bitter and mad. But then his whole demeanor changed. He accepts, lisp and all. And their friendship, you can tell, isn't fully healed, but the gesture is real. And Sean tells him, hey, I wouldn't have made it this far without you. And they appear to mostly, let's patch this up and move past this. And then Jorge asks for a ride to the dentist.
That's a man of conviction.
Sean tells Brian and Liz that you have to make sacrifices for the people you love, as he's telling them what he's done, because they're impressed that, Jorge's been mad at him this whole episode. And here he is being like, hey, I'm going to give up my bird room.
Yep.
I'll give that up to offer Jorge a place to live because he's my friend. And Sean says, hey, you have to make sacrifices for the people you love. And this provokes a reaction out of both Brian and Liz.
The two most selfish people.
Yeah. As we're getting to Alice's grad party here, though, Paul is having these sweet little goodbye moments with everyone. He tells Sean how proud of him he is. They have this another hug it out moment. He's getting told he doesn't have to pay Brian's last invoice, but then he does.
California state law.
California state law says you have to pay, of course. But this is an ongoing theme of the party. Everyone's saying goodbye to Paul. And Alice thanks everyone there for being by her side, which I kind of go back to that moment at the beginning of the episode. It's like, no, Alice has more than just Jimmy. And I understand the biological part, but I think there's a line, that line was there to just kind of prove to the audience, like, Jimmy's projecting a little bit. Because Alice is clearly not in the same place because she doesn't have the same hurt from Randy.
Jeff Daniels.
Julie tells Jimmy she's not sure which is harder, being the one who leaves or being left behind, which, Julie, read the room.
She might be aware of what Jimmy's gone through, but she wasn't there when Jimmy went through it.
Yeah.
And doesn't see how wild his emotional range can be.
I felt like this whole episode, they were not subtle with the foreshadowing.
This was what we in the biz and Marky Mark and George Clooney call the perfect storm.
Yeah. Alice tells Paul, no hugging if you're going to cry. Dad's been crying every time I go near him. And of course, Dad is standing nearby and can hear all this. And then Paul echoes Randy's line from earlier. He says, well, not as everyone is as sensitive as your dad. And you can tell it lands like a second punch to Jimmy.
Although the way he says
Yep.
it feels like an actual term of endearment.
Same word, way different context, but Jimmy can't hear the difference. Cody, Randy said not everyone's as sensitive as you as a dismissal. Paul echoes the word later, but it's in a completely different context. But Jimmy hears them the same way. From a clinical standpoint, is there a term for when someone can't distinguish between criticism and an observation because he's just wounded too deep?
We hear what we want to hear. We ignore the context clues that would add a lot more meaning to the situation because it fits our narrative. Cognitive distortions and all that jazz. We get hyperfixated, and it's not usually for the best.
Paul, perhaps noticing that something's up with Jimmy, follows him out to the balcony and asks where they're doing their goodbye breakfast in the morning. And he unloads on him. Jimmy unloads. Just frustration, resentment, grief. It's all in this like raw, unfiltered wave. And he tells Paul that Gabby warned him. Gabby warned me that I would never get any acknowledgement from you no matter what I did. And she was right.
Oh, bringing up conversations out of context.
Oh, man. He calls Paul arrogant. He rages about the practice being handed to Gabby without even talking to him about it. He guilts Paul about needing Jimmy's help managing his Parkinson's and stuff in the last year. And then in the ultimate act of emotional sabotage, he accidentally blurts out that he slept with Paul's daughter. I think it was an accident, but...
In the moment, I'm watching this, and I'm like, oh, you're saying this to the wrong dad.
Yeah.
Because as much as they are colleagues, you can tell that Jimmy tries to have Paul fill that missing dad void in his life and views him as a father figure. And then he unloads all these things, and I'm like, these were supposed to be said to Jeff Daniels.
Yes. And even though Paul has minor agitations in this scene, he seems to get it pretty quickly that Jimmy is projecting
This is misplaced.
everything he couldn't say to Randy onto him. Jimmy's hitting Paul because Paul is safe to hit, and Randy will never be. And there's some incredible detours in this scene. Just Jimmy blurting out the Meg thing, Derek randomly appearing at one point on the deck.
It's the only place to pee.
You had to go by 3 bathrooms to get to that deck. Derek, get out of here. But Jason Segel and Harrison Ford are wonderful in this scene. And Jimmy says, I'm not as important to you as you are to me. I'm embarrassed. Paul says, I don't want to leave with you having regrets. And both of those lines are just crushing.
They are.
Paul tells him, maybe these feelings aren't meant for me. And Jimmy says, it's fine. I'm not that sensitive. I'll survive. Then Jimmy turns away. And then there's this moment that echoes the moment with Randy earlier, where Paul clearly wants to say something and can't find the words. And when he stops and turns and walk away, I was yelling at my television, Cody. Oh, come on, Paul. Tell him.
So there's a couple things here. Paul maybe knowing Jimmy needs some space. Paul also having Parkinson's, which is going to affect his ability to speak, especially the more emotional the moments.
Yeah.
So that could be something.
That's a good observation.
What do you say in that situation?
Is Jimmy going to hear anything?
Yes. And so there's a handful of things that I'm like, I get it, Paul.
It's another Harrison Ford masterclass in acting. just wonderful stuff.
Again, best acting maybe since 1995.
We get these wrap-up scenes, these kind of wrap-ups to lead us into the season finale. Brian tells Charlie that he and the nanny are coming to Tennessee with his cowboy hat, singing Walking to Memphis, or Walking in Memphis. Liz has booked tickets for her and Derek to go to Europe, including going to the Guinness factory and Barcelona.
Also, I don't think that there is fruit that smells like booty there. So
it's a wonderful picture of these people choosing sacrifice for their loved ones and going away. And you can't help but see the disaster this might spell for Jimmy, who literally everyone in his life is leaving.
Yep.
At the same time. We cut to Paul sitting alone in his apartment, everything packed up, and he's texting Jimmy that his car is there. They're leaving for Connecticut. The song I Remember Everything by Zach Bryan is playing as Paul drives away. And this relationship, the most important one on this show, probably behind Jimmy and his daughter, is left completely unresolved heading into the finale.
Oh, I was so devastated.
Oh, man. It just crushing.
And so my wife said she was so disgusted with Jimmy, so angry with him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he might be the one I have the most sympathy towards with like the idiotic choices. Cause like each character has their moments throughout the season. Like I had that frustration level with Gabby. Jimmy, it really is the perfect storm. Losing a spouse would be difficult on anyone.
Yep.
You couple it with you have dad issues that are unresolved, that was a hang up while you were married, and he put on this big show at the funeral that he was going to be around more and really wasn't. And the father figure that you've had in a working relationship is selling the practice, really isn't fully communicative with him, and is gone.
Yeah. And see, I get being upset at Jimmy, but that's why I'm kind of upset with Paul. And I wonder if the season finale doesn't start with Paul making them take the car to wherever Jimmy's at. Because I feel like Paul's being just as stubborn here.
So, like...
And he's the one thinking straight.
He's thinking straight. I don't know if he's being stubborn. I think part of it is he might be emotionally hurt by some of what Jimmy did say.
Yeah.
Because even though it definitely was misplaced and projected, there was some subtle truths underneath everything that was said. That you got to do some soul searching. And him messaging Jimmy, because he messaged a couple messages that morning, that it's obvious that he really wants Jimmy to make that step of saying, okay, we'll go here, or I do want to see you. Because again, you can only control what you can control, and Paul can't control Jimmy.
Yeah.
Paul can just offer these opportunities. But Paul also is fully aware that Jimmy, who is sensitive, is going to feel the weight of what he has said to him, especially since he didn't say that to Jeff Daniels,
Right.
who is the worst.
And now,
Oh, Jeff Daniels.
what happens when Dr. Paul moves and you're not talking to him and his health gets worse? Like, this just goes down a road that could be rough, where maybe he doesn't ever talk to Paul again. And then when he decides he wants to, it's too late.
Oh, yeah. And like if the even if he's physically still here, he might not be of capacity to express or carry on. Now, I do have some thoughts, though, about where this could go, because I sent you an article.
Is this the Bill Lawrence quote?
Yes.
Yes. So do you want me to say it real quick?
Yeah.
Then you can elaborate what you think?
Yes.
So apparently Bill Lawrence did an interview.
William Lawrence himself.
And basically said the story for this all along was 3 seasons, but they've already greenlit the 4th season and seem to indicate that this will be the end of this kind of phase of this story, and that season 4 may have different characters around Jimmy, I'm assuming. So these people are actually leaving.
So, yeah, I knew when I first started this show that it was always projected to be 3 seasons. And, like, he's been tweeting some fans who are like, oh, you should have stopped at 3 because this is peak television. And he was like, we'll wrap up a lot of the storylines here. A lot of these characters will be back in some capacity. And we have some more stories that we can definitely tell. It just is going to be a shift.
Yeah.
So with Gabby owning the practice and making it a trauma hospital, his daughter moving off to the East Coast, his mentor moving off to the East Coast, there might not be a whole lot that actually is keeping Jimmy on the West Coast. And so maybe Jimmy like struggles out in Cali and then visits Alice in season 4 and ends up talking with Paul, and maybe Paul's daughter is back on the market and it can be a serious relationship.
Yeah. Or Bill Lawrence also seemed to indicate there was a time jump, which makes me scared about Harrison Ford's character.
I mean, I was scared for the end of this season, so because things seem to be progressing. Also, with some conditions, especially with the elderly folks, that with dramatic changes, it can speed up the progression of it. And so that's also been my concern. Like, oh, why are we moving to the East Coast? Paul, stay where you're at. Daughter, move here.
Yeah. Shrinking word of the day is abandonment. Every single storyline in this episode is about someone leaving, someone being left, or someone choosing whether to follow. Paul's leaving for Connecticut. Alice is leaving for Wesleyan. Sean is moving out of the pool house. Charlie's going to Tennessee. Brian has to decide whether to go with him. Derek and Liz are going to go to Europe, but Liz didn't want to go at first. Matthew is moving out of the space, and even Randy is leaving again because that's what Randy does.
Jeff Daniels.
And by the end of the episode, Jimmy's standing in the middle of all of it, watching every single person in his life move in a different direction. This sets up a pretty interesting season finale, I think. Song of the episode, Cody, I Remember Everything by Zach Bryan, featuring Casey Musgraves. Krista Miller, she doesn't miss, man.
I am a big Casey Musgraves guy. Haven't listened to much Zach Bryan, so.
Yeah, this was a massive track, apparently, from Zach's 2023 self-titled album. It's one of the more stunning country duets, I'm told, in recent memory. And the song is about two people looking back on a relationship that fell apart, remembering every detail, every moment, even the ones that hurt, and just kind of sitting with how none of it can be undone, which is not necessarily a great feeling considering how this episode ends. But the lyric, I wish I didn't, but I do remember every moment on the nights with you. It's a song, Cody, about the weight of memory and the the cost of holding on to all of it. And playing it over Paul's departure while Jimmy is refusing to show up for their goodbye breakfast, it feels like a dagger. The song aches, man. I could have done without it. Made me cry a little. Who's your who grew for this week?
Jorge
grew, man.
Yes. He went from feeling like he was completely abandoned and was completely neglecting the whole, my best friend actually has an opportunity to live out his dream, and was willing to even entertain this offer, which would be a big step for any person that I know, that like, I actually listened to someone I was having a huge grudge match with, and I was willing to accept that offer and also willing to have them take me to the dentist.
Yeah.
And so like for 3 seasons, I would say Sean, just because like Sean would not have done that, especially after Jorge challenges him to a fight. But Jorge.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Brian. The man 7 days ago delivered a speech about healthy selfishness and compared himself to Mother Teresa. And this week he had to eat his own words. He doesn't want to go to Tennessee. It's humid. There's pecan pie. It's sticky. And he'd have to leave behind his life here for 3 months. But when Sean's sacrifice for Jorge hits him, he echoes Sean's words. Sometimes you make sacrifices for the ones you love, even if you're going to hold it against them later on.
Yep.
So he's still him. He's still Brian, but it was charming, and that's growth from a guy who's literally the poster child for selfishness on this show. How many night oats out of 10 do you give this episode, Cody?
It had all the emotions. 9.5.
Yeah, I'm also going 9.5. It was really good. This was a really good episode. I'm scared for next week, man.
So after I watched this episode, I told you that I was like, I don't think you're going to like this one.
Yeah, well, it's good in that kind of way, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel great at the end of this episode. And I'm even more scared about next week. But it's so good.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
Yeah. And we hope you'll be here for it too. This one more watch along to go, one more episode to go, and we'll be done with shrinking for this season. We'll have to wait a while.
Fromspiracies will abound.
We'll have to get into the mystery and horror of From after this. It'll be quite the culture shock.
It will be.
But one more week of shrinking. We'll see you then.